What is secular humanism? Secular humanism is a philosophy that embraces evidence-based logic and reason as the basis for morality, whilst rejecting religious dogma, supernaturalism, and superstition as a component of the decision-making process. Today, I'll explain how secular humanism is more ethical than religion, with ethical being defined as valuing life and existence. For my first piece of supporting evidence, we go to the History Channel documentary, Salem Witch Trials. The documentary goes on to explain that through a series of baseless accusations, 205 people were incarcerated, 20 were tried, 19 were sentenced to death, and another 4 starved to death while waiting trial in prison, all because they were accused of witchcraft. It wasn't until outside intervening forces used logic and reason to restore the area out of hysteria. If the major premise of my syllogism is that to be ethical is to value life and existence, then the minor premise is that because religion creates a thought process in which with zero evidence you could have people incarcerated and sentenced to death, because secular humanism doesn't do these things, secular humanism is more ethical than religion. My second piece of supporting evidence comes from the Harvard Gazette. 2 articles. One called Stem Cells, a New Advancement, the other one called Stem Cells, Through a Religious Lens. These articles explain that religious politicians have put hurdles in the place of scientific advancement. For the last 20 years, these scientists that work at Harvard have been attempting to use stem cell research to garner cures and treatments for all sorts of ailments that affect the human population today. Well, if the major premise of my syllogism is that to be ethical is to affect life and existence, then my minor premise is that because religious authorities put these hurdles in front of scientific advancement, they are hurting, or at least lowering the quality of life for an immeasurable amount of people that cascade into the future. And because secular humanism does not do this, secular humanism must be more ethical than religion. My third piece of supporting evidence comes from Rolling Stone magazine article titled The Forsaken. The article goes on to explain how a rising number of gay teens are being cast out by their religious parents, historically being subjected to things such as sexual conversion therapy. Because the religious thought process enables people to view other citizens who think differently as lesser or different, or in this case, curable, it affects those people's lives and existence in a negative way. If my major premise for my syllogism is that ethical means to value life and existence, by creating an environment in which the quality of life for a certain section of civilization is being lessened, then because secular humanism doesn't define these people in such ways, secular humanism must be more ethical than religion. My fourth piece of evidence also comes from Rolling Stone magazine, an article titled How Cardinal George Pell Became the Highest Ranking Catholic Archdiocese Member to be Charged with Sexual Assault. The article goes on to explain that over the course of the last 30 years, the Catholic Archdiocese used a system of transfers to move priests from one location to another after they had been accused of pedophilia. And it essentially prolonged not only the justice-seeking process, but increased the amount of victims. Now, if the major premise of my syllogism is that to be ethical is to value life and existence, because they not only distorted the ability for people to gain justice for themselves, but prolonged and increased the amount of victims, then my minor premise is that because secular humanism didn't seek to defend people who were harming children, then it must be more ethical than religion. For my counterarguments, my opponent may say that religious practitioners aren't burning witches at the stake anymore, but according to National Geographic magazine, an article titled "Witch Trials 21st Century," as recently as 2009, people have been accused of witchcraft and burned alive at the stake. My opponent may say that harvesting stem cells is unethical, but the cures and treatments for disease that have come from stem cell research greatly outnumber any harm that may have done in the past. To quote Dr. Florian Merkel, there is a universe of disease out there, and our ability to affect treatment on these diseases comes from the ability to grow a certain type of cell in a dish. My opponent may say that there's no more religious practitioners that are subjecting sections of society to debasement based on their life or sexual or religious choices. But not a year goes by that the Westboro Baptist Church doesn't come out and publicly lambaste some section of society for having different values than they do. My opponent may say that, well, what about the Ten Commandments? They've been governing morality for thousands of years. To that I would say, there are many religions in the world, and they all came out with something similar to the Ten Commandments. And so, as a logic and reason-based person, I don't need a burning bush to tell me not to lie, cheat, steal, or kill. In conclusion, religion has affected society negatively in many facets. They use superstition and scriptures to justify negativity towards different sects of society. They create hurdles that prevent cures and treatments for disease. My question to you is, how long are we going to allow this to continue? Or how long is it going to take for a greater people understand that secular humanism is more ethical than religion?